Money's oxygen to a startup. You run out of money, you're dead. Your job as the CEO is to make sure your team has enough oxygen to get where they need to go. The moment you run out of oxygen, you're dead. I used to say fuel. The moment you run out of fuel, the car coasts to a stop. Great, I'll find fuel, I'll refill the car. Doesn't work that way with startups. You run out of oxygen, they go their own way, you're not putting the team back together.
Welcome to the Rubasha Family Podcast. I have a very, very special guest in the building. Andrew Backerman is a two-time startup founder, VC, Series A, proptech in construction and tech. And, with a stellar career, consultant turned serial entrepreneur, turned angel, then family office director, currently VC and CPV syndicate sponsor investor. He has over a decade of startup investing in over 70 investments. Initially a journalist, and he specialized in edtech, currently investing in proptech and construction, like I mentioned. And he's always eager to embrace new opportunities. And the powerful book as his author, The Entrepreneur's Odyssey, a novel approach to startup success, and that authentic window to what it really takes to turn an idea into a viable startup. And wow, what a passion, career. And it's a pleasure to have you on, Andrew.
I love the energy. Thanks for that intro.
No worries at all. Andrew, can you talk to us a little bit about your journey? And when I mean by your journey, you come from grandparents who have come from entrepreneurs. Then you have your dad who maybe didn't take that approach. And then now you. So does it come within the family? Does it come with DNA? Can you talk to us a little about this vision and the imagination you had to create from your imagination into reality?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do that. Right. So sometimes I say that I had the inspiration, but not the mentorship. Right. So both my grandparents, my grandfathers were entrepreneurs. On my mom's side after the war, he did everything from manufacturing, Zippo lighters all the way out. He ended his career doing insurance products actually. And on my other side, my other grandfather, he'd make candy stores, toy stores, candy stores in edgy neighborhoods. And the neighborhoods start getting better. Then he'd sell it and he'd move a couple of blocks over to the edgy part of town again and open up a new one. But unfortunately, they both died when I was fairly young. My first grandfather died when I was 12. And, the other grandfather died before I was in college. So I had them as kind of a loose inspiration. I didn't have them as mentors when I was coming out of school to lean on. And like a lot of immigrant parents, they wanted their children to be in more stable professions. So, what does that mean? My dad ended up becoming a doctor, right? It's not, at least traditionally, one of the more entrepreneurial fields. You come in, you got to learn certain things. You kind of know what you got to do for the next, X decades of your life. It's not strictly true, but you get the idea. So, for me, a lot of what I learned along the way. So while I do believe some people, they just got it, they're born with it, or it's like mother's milk to them. And while I conversely other believe, some people just won't do it. It's not for them. They won't get it. For the vast majority of us out there, entrepreneurship is a skill, and you can learn it just like any other skill.
Powerful when you break down the history there. So Andrew, what does it take to become an entrepreneur? What does it take to start a business?
A lot of self-delusion and, huge appetite for risk. I'll break it down for you, right? So the odds are stacked against an entrepreneur, right? It just is. Most businesses fail. And tech startups, absolutely, but even small businesses. I'm going to go buy a car wash. A lot of them fail, right? So you got to be a certain kind of crazy to want to do that. You got to be, listen, I want to be my own boss. I don't want other people to be my boss anymore. Or I believe in this idea so much that I've got to do it. The idea of me going through my entire life without ever trying this, intolerable. I can't look back when I'm 70 and say I never did this. You have to have some kind of that kind of craziness inside you. Now, if you've got that and you're at the right point in your life to take those risks, right? Hint, hint, when you're a little younger and maybe you don't have kids, or they're very young, and you have health insurance through your spouse or partner, that's a good time. When you got 3 kids in college and you need to pay those bills and you're maybe the one working full time, and if you quit to do a startup, you got to go on the exchange for healthcare. That's a lot harder time in your life, to take a swing at being an entrepreneur. But if you've got that and you're at the right stage in your life to do it, you just got to do it. Right? You got to find some way to do it. Join a startup, see what that's like. Start your own startup. Talk to a zillion people who have done it. But if you don't do it, if you're that kind of person and you have that right time and you have the opportunity, jump on it, because otherwise you'll you'll be a bitter old man. Why didn't I try?
Would you advise someone that they could also be working their job while also becoming an entrepreneur and having at least that
Yeah,
stable income?
yeah. So there comes a point where you have to fish or cut bait, but that point is further out than it's ever been, right? So it used to be when you got started, you need $5 million just to build something. And the reason you did it was because you couldn't build on anything else, right? If I wanted to put something online, I needed to buy a server, I need to put it in a room, I needed to make sure like that data connection was rock solid. Then I need to code everything from scratch, right? Any little thing I wanted to build, I had to code. A couple of years later, Amazon Web Service, actually before that, you get these remote hosting services like Globix. Oh, you can put our machine in this data center downtown. Like you go, it's in the basement, it's freezing cold because there's a zillion machines in there. But you slide it into the rack, you hook it up, they'll make sure that stuff doesn't go down. Okay, so I didn't need a server room, I still needed my own machine. Great, that's cheaper. A couple of years later, Amazon spins out Amazon Web Services. I don't even need a machine of my own. I just basically rent parts of their virtual machines. I need more, I pay them a little bit more. They devote a little bit more to me. Gets a lot easier. You got other companies that have created APIs. So like, I need to be able to do this. There's another piece of software that just does that already. I'm just going to buy it, plug it in, pay them a couple of bucks a month to use that service. Or GitHub, right? There's a lot of people who have coded things already. They put their code up there. I'm going to put it down. I'm going to break it apart, use it. Now, like a lot of AI coding tools come out there, like you can build your first version of it using those tools, even without having a programmer on board. So over time, there's more and more of a framework and tools and other accessories that have let people get further and further with less initial money to start with. And what that means for somebody who's sitting in their office or in their cube, like, I got this problem I want to solve. It's going to be huge. You can do a lot more before you quit your day job. You can get a lot further. You can get a prototype up. You can test some of your model. But at some point, you're going to have to take the plunge.
And taking that plunge is now that next step. And so can you talk to us a little bit about your first startup? What was in your imagination, from, graduating university or college, they say in America, to then creating your own business?
Yeah. So when I graduated college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And sort of partly just to see what would happen, I applied to business schools. And they don't usually take people directly through. A couple of schools took me. I think I was the youngest person in my class in business school. Just because of that, plus I'm a December baby. My birthday was 2 days ago, or 2 days from when we recorded this. I don't know when this comes out. So then I went to business school. And then coming out of business school in like the mid 90s, like there was no real like startup culture, right? I'm an entrepreneur meant like I'm unemployed. There's a couple of, there's some sites out there, but it was super early. Like there was one guy in my business school class who did VC. No one really knew what Ben did. We just knew it was something to do with startups. The irony is like Ben and I always kept in touch because we used to ski together. And then I ended up in the same field. I'm like, okay, now I know exactly what Ben does. But it wasn't a thing. So I went out, I was a consultant for the first 4 years of my career, worked for Fortune 100 companies, helping them like stitch two companies together, helping them like decide if they wanted to acquire companies, helping them get better operations. And then 1999, I'm on this project and we're building with outside help, an intranet that lets these two companies that are about to merge create pro forma financials of what the merged company looks like without anybody from either other company seeing the data, which would have contaminated them if the merger didn't go through. And I remember thinking, that's it. That's what I want to do. That didn't exist 4 years ago when I graduated. It exists now. So I quit my job. I moved. I was living in Chicago at the time. I moved back to New York. I took a job at Kaplan Test Prep, helping them move their products online just to learn the internet, just to learn how this stuff worked. And within 9 months, I teamed up with two other founders and we created our first startup.
And what startup was that?
The company was called Bunk One. For those of you who are familiar with summer camps, again, I don't take it for granted. It's very much an American thing in a lot of ways. This was a company that would provide web services for summer camps, photo galleries, so you could see what was going on at camp, which was for your precious young person. If it was a sleepaway camp, there were one-way email systems called bunk notes, where you as a parent could type your message on your computer, but it got printed and handed to the child so that they didn't have to be anywhere near a device. And eventually a whole camp management system.
What was the biggest challenge? What was the hardest moment when you guys were building the business?
It was a pretty rough moment where we all got together and we realized we couldn't make payroll. The founders all went without salary for over a year. So here, I'll tell you what precipitated it. So, set your mind back, if you're old enough, to 2000, like everything's booming. Like everything's startups were taking off like rocket ships. Stupid ideas in many cases, but who knew back then? So we had an offer on the table from a VC fund to back us. And we'd gotten the offer in the spring, but this is a summer-based business, right? It's a seasonal business, summer camps. So we had decided, or the CEO had decided to slow walk that offer because he wanted to see what the revenue was going to come in over the summer to see if he can go back and get a better offer, a better valuation from the VC fund. So summer's over, it was a good summer. And then September 11th happened. Our VC fund was headquartered in the Twin Towers. So the guy that we were speaking to actually, thankfully, thank God, was alive and well, or at least he was alive and well as of September 12th, but his firm ceased to exist. And then 2001 became a very bad year for startups, like for startup financing. Like there's very little VC activity, kind of the world came to its realization that eyeballs themselves were not enough. So, into that environment, we're still burning cash because like we're early. We've got, a couple of hundred camps, but it's not nearly enough to cover our expenses. And, the three of us, we didn't love the idea, but we could. So we went without salary for, I think over a year until our revenue caught up to the point where we could start paying ourselves again. Not a lot, but something. So that was not fun, to use a technical term. That's also the kind of thing like you got to understand can happen, right? So you got to be open to that possibility, and you have to have the personality and like the mental preparation for that situation and the financial ability to absorb it. If you don't have it at this point in your life, don't jump ship just yet.
Wow. So just quick question. When you said couldn't make payroll, of course, like you guys as founders couldn't pay yourselves, but what about employees? Did they
So we were
leave?
able to, by us not taking any salary, we had a few more people we could pay. I mean, it was a long time ago. I don't remember if one or two of them had to take a bit of a pay cut or deferred pay, like we said, pay them back. I don't remember if we did that or not. If we did, I'm sure we paid them back before we took our salary.
Okay. So just even that example of like the VC 9/11 happening, how does one navigate around uncertainties? Can you imagine just things, boom, 1 second, one day, that changes everything? COVID, all these things like, how does
Mm-hmm.
one within business, I was just seeing a video I shared on Instagram and TikTok. Patrick Bet David was talking about Best Buy went out of business, Blockbuster went out of business. Are you bigger than all of these companies? These are companies out there, Prime doing big. How does one now navigate around uncertainty in business that anything can happen? And how do you now continue to, climb and keep going? And, companies who have been around for 100, 200 years, they must be doing something right because life just happens. Yeah. How does one navigate around those uncertainties?
There's certain things you just can't, right? They're going to come out of left field. You're not going to be able to predict them, and you're just going to have to react to them. And they may kill the company. You just have to accept that. If it can kill Best Buy, it can kill your, two-person startup that raised $100,000 in friends and family funding. Now, the one thing you have going for you is that, you're a lot more nimble, right? You go without salary for a couple of months, you go back to the drawing board, you change your COVID hit. Okay, we're going to come up with a way to do this remotely. If you're small and nimble, maybe you can. In some ways, you have some advantages, but you don't know, right? You just have to be prepared. You have to be prepared for the unprepared, prepared to move fast. So I had a company, for instance, that we invest in. It's a very cool idea. In fact, somebody's trying to do this again now. And the idea was instead of being WeWork and having like all these buildings or long-term leases in all these buildings, they were going to go to primarily restaurants or hotels with event space and say, most of your time, the space is empty, right? Lunch, half of your restaurant's empty. Really, you have the restaurant because you want to be able to fill it at dinner. So let us use half of your space, and it'll be co-working space for startups. And by the way, if you sell them coffee or donuts along the way, or whatever it is you sell, paninis, like that's extra food and beverage revenue for you. But we'll use the space. It'll cost us nothing or almost next to nothing, and it'll be cheaper for the entrepreneurs who need co-working space. And hey, coffee will probably be better. So it was an interesting idea. They had some very good early traction. Then COVID hit. Nobody was working anywhere. So, that really killed the company. But these guys, they were pissed. But, I was like, okay, let's be angry for 5 minutes and then we're going to build something else. So they flipped it around and they were using stuff around like the pieces of their software that were around managing capacity and who was going to sit where in these different spaces. They ended up selling some of that software to universities for managing capacity around those must be 6 feet apart COVID restrictions. Right. And I had some early sales. It wasn't enough, but at the end of the day, like their answer was life happened, right? Can't do anything about that. We're not a big enough company to try to just wait it out. So we got to change. We got to do something different. And they moved fast. Didn't work, but that was their best shot.
So it's being able to, exactly like you said, be nimble and move quickly. It's interesting because similar within our business, we we do podcast production and things like that. But then we noticed a little change in the marketplace. Boom, we were able to now pivot and see another gap in the marketplace and still not change the core product or service, but add something extra that maybe people want.
Yeah, like you can think about it's a difference between a speedboat and an aircraft carrier or a battleship. We'll keep it a little bit more apples to apples, right? The battleship's got a lot of the big guns, right? It's got a lot of armor. It's got a lot going for it. It can handle stormy weather pretty well. What it can't do is it can't turn on a dime to, find other opportunities. A speedboat you can turn on a dime. So you got certain advantages, unlike the startup world, where like a startup will take on a Fortune 100 company without blinking an eye. I wouldn't take on a battleship with a speedboat, but you do have certain advantages as a startup if you're the kind of person that temperamentally and by training is going to take advantage of those.
And I mean, with your experience working with Fortune 100 companies, the battleships that you just referring to, what do they do very well that startups like, the mid-market businesses can learn from?
Yeah, so some of them don't, right? Some of them don't. So they have a couple of advantages going for them, whether it's something they do right or not. So number one, for the vast majority of the people out there, they're not interested in taking chances in like, will I get the product, not get the product? They're not interested in learning something new. So there's a lot of inertia that's in their benefit. A lot of people are not the early adopters. Like it kind of dawns on them later in the second or third wave. They're like, I'm going to start using this, which gives a large organization that is nimble enough to follow at a reasonable pace. It gives them strengths, right? They don't have to be number one at bringing out this new technology, but if they see it fast enough, they can get themselves moving and roll it out before it's too late. That can be enough in many cases. Now, often they can't, right? So let's take a couple of big examples, right? There's nothing that prevented, say, Hertz or Avis from doing the zip car model, right? Rent by the hour, all in, on demand, park it on the street type stuff. It goes straight from like one customer to the next and, customer fills the tank, that kind of stuff. Nothing prevented them from doing that model. Just didn't occur to them. Couldn't think that they didn't really recognize it as like, oh, those speedboats have RPGs on them. Those could be dangerous. End of the day, they ended up buying Zipcar for $7 billion. That's the price of not moving fast enough. And I don't mean startup fast enough. They could have just been company fast enough. Seeing it after 2 or 3 years and saying, oh, we can do that too. That might have been enough to catch it in 2 years. After 6, 7 years, it was too late. Or Blockbuster, right? Remember Blockbuster, video cassette rentals? Netflix came out, they're doing it by mail. Blockbuster's like, yeah, people like to come in the stores. We're not going to do the mail system. Then Netflix, smart, they see the writing on the wall for their first model and they pivot and they do just streaming. Like, I don't know how many people remember this. Originally, Netflix model was they would put a bunch of CDs in the mail, send it to you, you paid that fee, and then, flat fee, as many CDs as you could possibly want. You only have like 2 or 3 at a time. But they saw the writing on the wall for physical delivery of video content, pivoted, cannibalized themselves, killed the old business, and became just all video streaming. There's nothing that prevented Blockbuster from doing that. It was just painful. Like, we have all these stores. Let's why throw away these assets that we have? Well, guess what? They weren't really assets at the end of the day. They were liabilities. So companies can do it. They have the resources to not be the first person out there as long as they build the muscles of being a fast follower. Just they don't always.
It's also interesting, that one with the Avis and the Hertz, the car rental. So when now, instead of them adapting to that model, now they have to go out and buy the.
Yeah, it was too late. They had to buy it. They had to buy a Zipcar for $7 billion. Or they ended up building on their own. Like I'll throw out a startup and you'll tell me exactly which corporates could have built it but didn't. Airbnb, who could have built that? It's not hard. It's not a trick question. Any hotel chain, Marriott, you name it, they could have built it. They ultimately have adapted and they've tried to order like more flexible models. Had they moved faster, they could have sucked the air out of the room. It's not hard. For every WeWork, any large real estate organization could have thought about that, and there were co-working spaces already. Just WeWork made it cool, right? WeWork did it a little differently. So for every one of these big startups, there are large corporates who could have moved fast enough to co-opt it and brought it into their model sooner.
Powerful. It's really really intriguing, and I think it's good for the startups who are listening to this, to know that you can be nimble, you can move, you do have that competitive advantage. So let me ask you, what does the future look like for you? What does the next 10 years look like for you? What's your mission and vision right now?
In a weird sort of way, uh, if I'm not surprised at where I am in 10 years, I'll be disappointed. Right. So where I was 10 years ago and 20 years before that, I never would have called those shots. My career looks a little zigzaggy and it's worked out nicely so far, knock wood. But, so what could happen in the next 10 years? I could raise a fund. I could do that. Maybe I do more and more work in corporate innovation as a consultant. Maybe the book takes off and I do a lot of speaking tours and I just do some startup investing along the sides. I don't know. Maybe some of my prior startups get so big that I don't need to work anymore. That would be lovely. I don't think I'll ever stop working. I just, it's like they say, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. So I do love what I do. So I don't know. It could be any of those things, or it could be something completely different.
When you look to invest in a startup, what do you look for? What are the key characteristics that you look for to say, I want to put my money in that company?
All of them. So, okay, that's a silly answer, but I'll tell you what I mean by it. I want you to visualize in your head two things. I want you to visualize in your head a rope and visualize in your head a chain. Now, let's say the rope frays a little bit. A couple of the strands are broken. The rope probably still holds. Like what you're visualizing is a thick rope. A couple of strands break. Okay, it's still good, right? You can still do what you need to do with that rope. Now imagine one of the links in the chain breaks. Your chain's useless, right? Doesn't matter. The other links could be like rock solid or hard as steel. Doesn't matter if one link in the chain is broken, the chain isn't going to do the job. Startups are like chains. And it doesn't matter how strong a revenue model or go-to-market this startup has. If the total addressable market is too small for it to be venture backable, that's all she wrote, right? And it doesn't matter how big the market is if the company is behind the competition and there's better guys out there. Every link has to be correct and strong. Otherwise, the startup doesn't do it.
And what are the characteristics that you look for in the founder?
Mm.
Or do you look for at that? Is that
Yeah, no,
something
no,
that
absolutely. Absolutely. Like earlier in my career, a couple of times I got so in love with the idea and the progress that a startup had made so far that I overlooked some of my gut feelings or misgivings about a startup team every time I got bit, right? It didn't work out. So the overall characteristic I look for most is I like founders who have well-reasoned but loosely held opinions. And what I mean by that is if I ask them a question, there's always a good reason for it. But if I present them with other data that they didn't have or a different line of reasoning that they maybe hadn't considered, they will seriously consider it. Now, they won't necessarily just flip their opinion, nor should they. They shouldn't be a weather vane. Last person they talk to, that's the way they swing. But they should not be so wedded to their current plan and their current assumptions and their current, reading of the market that if you present them with a compelling argument to the contrary or data that suggests otherwise, that they're not willing to change their mind. So I'm looking for that happy medium between knowing what they're doing and being willing to stick to their guns and also being able to update what they're doing in light of new information.
And what was the impact of having mentors in your life in this business journey?
So I didn't have good mentors early on in my career. And probably as a result of that, it took me longer to get from one job to the next than it should have. So for example, when I was working at Bunk One, that was 8 years, I was very heads down. Got to make this a success, got to make this a success. And I had no one to tap me on the shoulder and said, Andrew, eventually you're going to sell the company or you're going to get bought out, as the case turned out to be. And for you to have another job ready for you to go to, you need to have been spending time over these past couple of years cultivating your network, building your personal brand, becoming visible and known. So I got out, I got my last check from Bunk One. I'm done. Great. What am I going to do next? I got to start from nothing. I got very lucky. I had a friend who was leaving his job. And he's like, you would do great in my job. Let me introduce you to the boss. But, it might not have been that way. And when I left that other job, to do my second startup. And the second startup was not nearly as successful as the first. When I wrapped up the second startup, it was a better part of a year before I found my next gig. And it was because at that point I realized, okay, I have to build my personal brand. And I took steps to doing that to become more and more visible. But I really should have been doing it all along. But I didn't have at that point a mentor in my life to tell me that. And that's the kind of thing that a mentor would have ideally warned me about, among many other things that I'm sure I did wrong and I just don't realize it.
You said something that's very key there, building a personal brand. Can you talk about why that you think that's fundamental now more than ever to have a personal brand? And it's something that we've seen, it's people sometimes think it's new, haven't no, we've been seeing this, right? The personal brand has always been quite valuable, right? Yeah. What's your advice to,
So
founders on
building
building
a
a brand?
personal brand is a fancy way of saying make sure people know you. And when they think of you, they're thinking what you want them to think of them. So I want people to think about me like this is a guy. He's not just your same old startup investor. He actually thinks deeply and differently about it. He's got, an interesting framework that he uses, lets him see the world differently, hopefully lets him identify startups differently than everyone else. He goes about that kind of investing in different ways than the average, investor does. So maybe not for everybody, but for a certain type of startup, and conversely, for a certain type of, say, investor in a VC fund, like when they think about it, it's like, all these guys are kind of the same, but Andrew's different because, and then he'll or she'll fill in that line. If they fill in the line that I wanted them to fill in, then I've successfully built my brand. People know you. They're like, yeah, that's a good person to have on this panel. Or you're looking for somebody. Let me see if Andrew's happy where he is. Like that's how you know you built a personal brand because you're coming to mind to people at the right time.
That association, which is what I like to call it, when they think of, that's what they think of, which is quite fundamental. Do you think that plays a big role in founders who are one day looking for that exit? Does Because a lot of people say, well, I don't want the business to be relying on me. It can't be relying on me, for us to have an exit, then, which is understandable. So, do you think building a powerful personal brand also relays
Early
into
on,
that?
it's going to be reliant on the founders, obviously, right? It's their idea. They have to execute. At certain points, they get beyond the point where it's about them. They have to replace people and personality with process. So, get to like 10, 15 people, you can't just have everyone around the table and make decisions by consensus anymore. You have to have departments. You have to have direct reports, right? The CEO may not or have everybody just reporting to them directly when they're at 16 and 20 people for sure. So you start putting the process in place, and as the company continues to mature, you're putting more and more of that scaffolding. You get an HR department, you get a CFO, right? You have formal budgeting, and it's not just you budgeting; it's all the departments submitting the budgeting, improved. Like you start putting that all in place as the company matures and those processes and the scaffolding get built. Then, no matter how awesome you are as a founder, you get replaceable at some point. And that guy might not be as good as you, might be better than you, but might not be as good as you. But it's not like, hey, so and so got hit with a car, startup's dead.
I love the way you have that perspective in terms of what you're saying because it's quite powerful. And I really want to take this into right now what's happening around the world with AI. How do you think now founders, CEOs can adapt to AI? Like you just mentioned now, you growing up the team, there's different departments coming in. Do we need a bigger team? Can we, again, it may not replace humans, but it can replace incompetence. It can, have automation. What are your thoughts now on AI? Do we need more people? Yeah, I'm intrigued to hear.
Listen, we've seen this movie before. It was just a Western and now it's a sci-fi. So I'll tell you what I mean by this, right? So let's take it to the super highest level. Let's only roll it back a couple of years. Blockchain comes out. Oh, we can do cryptocurrencies, but we can also do all this other stuff on chain that we couldn't do before. I got to rethink, like, is my way of doing it really the most efficient way to do it? Maybe it's more efficient if I put it on chain instead of a central ledger. Or maybe, wow, I can do things I could never do before. I'm going to build startups around that. That's a really good why now. So what happens is I got this tech advancement. Now there's so many other things I can do. A lot of new startups come out. And if you're on that wave and you're legit using it for something that, that it makes much better or makes possible, and not just, I'm sprinkling some fairy dust on top of my existing startup, then that's a good place to be. Replace natural language processing or blockchain, or before that mobile, and just mobile phones in general. Replace that with AI. That's a little bit like where we are in the startup scene right now. The provision of AI that can just be plugged in and applied to a bunch of different cases has opened up a whole new vista of startups that weren't possible before, certainly weren't possible with these economics. So if you're on the startup side of that fence, this is great. A lot of people are like hitting similar solutions, but at least you're at the right point in the cycle to be making something really, really awesome. Now, from the other side of the fence, you're in corporate, you're an established company. You got to ask yourself, like, how am I going to use this? Now, it may turn out that after a deep and thorough investigation, you decide you're not going to use it. And in many cases, that makes sense. So let's take the blockchain situation. Let's say you need to be a centralized ledger, right? Because you need to have like a God's eye view of all the data. You need to be able to manipulate it in ways that only somebody with like full admin capacity can. Then putting it on chain doesn't help you. In fact, you'd have to work backwards to do things that let you do things that chain doesn't want you to do, just to replicate where you are now. So you may make the conscious decision that this is a startup that blockchain is not suitable for. Now, it may turn out that what you do, maybe AI doesn't move the needle that much for you. And now I would argue, AI can do so many different things, it's hard to find that. But let's look at the core of your business. Let's say you are a sculptor. Can AI help you at the core of your business? Probably not. Maybe let's just take hypotheticals. Maybe you can like put up a whole bunch of high definition cameras and it can tell you if the rock, listen, there's a weak seam in the rock, don't try to carve it this way. It'll prevent you from like ruining a work because you didn't notice a flaw. Those are edge cases. At the end of the day, you're the sculptor. So you may decide AI has no place in what I'm doing. I know that's an extreme example. In most cases, it will be. Now, in some cases, it might be not the core of what I do, but everything else that I do. Like I'm going to use this to take costs out of my back office. I'm going to use this to take costs out of admin. I'm not going to do it for anything that touches my customers. For example, my wife's a real estate agent. There's a lot of AI solutions out there that are kind of like ingestion tools. They're chatbots, text or email or even voice, where they'll talk to the incoming customer and they'll say, what are you looking for? Oh, okay. In what neighborhood? Okay. What's your price range? Okay. I got you. What about this? Do you have a large dog, et cetera, et cetera? And if I were doing rentals, because rentals are like not a lot of money for a lot of work, I would 100% be on top of it. Because if the chatbot's not great, whatever, it's a numbers business. My wife, on the other hand, deals with people buying 4 bedroom apartments in Manhattan and Brooklyn. Like, the show $1 Million Listing? Great. That's a 1 bedroom in Manhattan. Not that impressive, right? I know, it's crazy. So if she has a client that's looking to buy a 4 bedroom apartment, that'd be $4 million deal. And she's not trusting that to a chatbot. She's on the phone with them, right? She wants them to like start developing that relationship with her. So she wouldn't use AI but making a conscious decision, she won't use AI for that feature. But would she use it maybe to help write the description of the property, right? Hey, I'm going to put it up on my site. I'm going to put it on the multiple listing service. I need to have a description of the property. Not everyone's gifted at like just steps from Central Park or, this, gracious, sunny, great room, blah, blah, blah. Okay, maybe I'll put it in there and I'll have AI write that description. That might be stuff that she's more interested in. So just to wrap that up with a bow for your audience, you got to think carefully about where, and even if AI makes sense for you. In most cases, it will make sense somewhere. But you have to decide, is this something that's with the core of what I do? Is it something that might be customer facing? Is it the stuff that really will make me win deals better? Or is it stuff that I'm going to use kind of behind the scenes on all the other stuff that has to get done, but if I can get it done faster or cheaper, that's a win. So that's the way you might think about AI for your business. There's a whole different answer if you're managing a tech team, but let's keep it at this level for kind of CEO level thinking.
Powerful. I love it. And it's very, very true, and people, it's not just like you said, kind of hopping on the bandwagon. Is like, okay, well, what can potentially make our lives easier if we're in, thing that doesn't necessarily need it? Well, can we automate the invoices? Can we automate, something that can help, us what we're doing, and then we can focus on what we're good at, and then we have AI in the back to facilitate that.
I'll tell everyone out there, you should be playing with AI just to understand it better. It's a new language. You know how to speak Google, you need to learn how to speak Gemini. or ChatGPT or Sora, whatever you're using, there's certain things that it's much better at. But until you learn how to use it, you don't know what it's better at. So I've actually used it in my own life. So I like writing. So I didn't write any of this with. Sorry for those of you just listening. I held up my book. I didn't use a ChatGPT or any of those guys for my book. Well, I should have used it to proofread. I had a bunch of people doing it. Proofreading probably would have been a good use case, but I did use it when I started thinking about promoting it. I wanted to go through all my email, figure out who I spoke to about a book, who I didn't speak to about the book, who might be professors of entrepreneurship, right? Who might want to use it in their class, who in my contacts are people that I don't want to talk to about the book because maybe I met them as part of a consulting engagement and it would be awkward, or my client might not like me sending them an email about the book. So to figure that out, that level of detail, I had to find a way to extract all my email from Gmail and parse it at scale and categorize it. So I spent like 3 or 4 days figuring out like what I could or could not do through ChatGPT to ultimately come up with like a couple of different mailing lists that I could approach differently, including what we used to call blacklists or exclusion lists of addresses I just wasn't going to use. Could I have done that another way? Maybe, right? Maybe. But I wanted to learn how to use ChatGPT to do it because I wanted to get a feel for, what is that the better tool for? When do I use that instead of the traditional tools? And there's no way to learn that other than to go back to basics. It's like, what's your favorite sport? Give me an example. What do you like?
Well, Americans call it soccer, so we call it
Okay, so
football.
football. Okay, so let's say a great example. Let's say you're doing corner kicks, right? And like you're okay at it, but like you're just not getting better. So you might bring in a coach, and the coach might say, "Listen, I see what you're doing. It's okay. There's a better way to do this." But to do that, we need to break this back down. This complex set of emotions, we need to break it down into its elements and we're going to build it back up. So they might actually break down the pieces of your approach, of your kick, from everything from ball placement to, the couple of steps you take, where you put your feet, how you hold your body as you're kicking. They got to break it all the way down to basics so they can build it up a different way and you can potentially get better. That's what we're doing with ChatGPT or AI, or we should be doing, is taking tasks that maybe you can do reasonably well, like writing an investment memo for a startup I want to invest in. I can do it the old way in about 20, 30 minutes. But my most recent one, I said, here's 10 of my investment memos. So now you know what I like to write. Here's all the data from the startup's data room. Boom, write my memo. Let me see what it looks like. And then I spent like an hour fixing it. So like maybe that wasn't the best use of AI, but I didn't know it until I tried it. So you as an entrepreneur, or you as someone doing whatever job you're doing, you should be looking for situations where you can, instead of speaking Google or doing it your own way, you can speak AI. And you can use one of those tools and see if you can do your job better or faster that way. But there's going to be a learning curve. But you have to do that.
It's so true. You gotta, can you, experiment and start to use it early so you can adapt. So I like to play a game, and it's gonna be interesting.
Okay.
So I'm gonna say a word, and then whatever comes to your mind, whatever word, just say it, and then I can get you to explain. Okay? CEO.
Tenacity.
Explain.
It's really hard to be the CEO of a startup. All right. It's hard. It's lonely. You're going to have low days. You're going to have people telling you it doesn't work. You have people that tell you it's going to be awesome. Like your friends want to be supportive and how awesome it is. Only you know that like you're banging a head against the wall. You haven't figured out how to get through to like these sales prospects, or like, your tech team's taking twice as long as they said they would. They always do. Right. Like you need to have that kind of dog with a bone. You're not going to let go of it attitude just to make it through the normal parts of startups. So if you're going to be a CEO, you have to have that kind of like, I don't want to fail. It's not going to happen to me.
It's hitting me. I love the way you said that, right? That tenacity, that dog in you to keep going, to stay relentless, powerful. That's a very good start. Money.
Oxygen.
Ooh, whoa, explain.
Money's oxygen to a startup. You run out of money, you're dead. Your job as the CEO is to make sure your team has enough oxygen to get where they need to go. The moment you run out of oxygen, you're dead. I used to say fuel. The moment you run out of fuel, the car goes to a stop. Great, I'll find fuel, I'll refill the car. Doesn't work that way with startups. You run out of oxygen, they go their own way, you're not putting the team back together.
Resilience. I've never had that before. That was actually pretty smart. I like that.
Yeah, so tenacity, resilience, I mean it the same way. I purposely didn't choose stubborn because like I told you have to be open to like zigging or zagging. when the situation warrants it. You even have to be open to quitting when the situation warrants it. But I consider tenacity and resilience kind of same, but different. And they're not exactly the same, but they're in that same idea cloud.
Could you count potentially, you said quitting, but in terms of quitting to pivoting, what's like, if example, we run out of oxygen and, we're breathe, but then we see, oh, okay, but there's a gap in the market that we can do here. Let's pivot. And okay, maybe we're kind of switching lanes a little bit from here and going there. What are your thoughts on
You
that?
want to know the difference between quitting and pivoting?
Yeah. I mean, is that quitting
If your investor can still make money if you succeed, it was a pivot. If he doesn't, it was a quit, right? I quit. I started a new startup. My old investor's like, no. But if I pivoted as part of the same startup, they can still make money. So, okay, again, kind of a flip answer. When I said quit, I meant the kind of situation where it's like, hey, dude, listen, I'm your investor. It's in my best interest that you just keep banging away at this for as long as possible, right? Even if it's an outside chance, that's still better than the zero if you quit, right? Those are my incentives as an investor. But dude, like you've been doing this for 3 years already. Presumably, you made a long list of the things you thought would succeed for the startup. You ranked them in odds of success. You've been working your way down the list, right? You're pretty far down the list. You're down at like a Hail Mary would be, a step up, right? These are the things that are like really outside chances of succeeding. You personally could be doing better things in life. Shoot this dog, maybe go back to corporate, build your career, maybe do another startup, but this is not the best use of your time. You've done all that you really should logically be doing here. And anything beyond this is grasping at straws. Like that's when it's time to quit. And it's hard to tell. Like you might still feel I'm so close to a breakthrough. And sometimes that's true. You keep going, but sometimes it's not true. It's that you're afraid to fail, or you're afraid of people saying that you've quit, or you've just been doing it for so long and you've been telling yourself that for so long that it's become a habit and you believe it, but it's not true anymore. Like you need to recognize those times and when it's the right time to quit. I believe that. Not all investors will do that. The other investors are like, if you believe in it, just keep going forever. But life's too short.
I love it. I love it. Investor.
Me. Sorry, investor. More than dumb money. Am I allowed to use multiple words? I
Yeah.
go more than
Yeah.
dumb money. And like not all investors are that way. Like an investor could just give you cash. But if you have your choice, you have the luxury of choice as an entrepreneur, you want someone who brings more to the table than just cash. They could be connections to potential customers or partners. They could be unique sets of skills and advice that you can't get elsewhere. A good investor should be more than just money.
Family office.
Enigma. No, that's not. I'm going to pull that back. Family office varies. My word is varies. So for those of you in the audience who don't know what family office is, it's an office, an organization set up by either a wealthy individual or a wealthy individual's family to manage their money, maybe even manage their charitable giving. Right? We're talking when you have like 50, $100 million or more, it's investable. And it's not as simple as, you and I sitting down in front of Ameritrade and figuring out, like, do you want to put our money in Vanguard's, Fortune 500 index, or do we want to put it in, something else? So they end up hiring a person or multiple people to do that for them. I worked at a family office for 3 years. Now, the reason I said variable or wild card would have been better, is if you worked at one family office, you've worked at one family office. They're all different. So for me, it was one older individual, never had kids. It was just him. His life ambition was to die with one penny in his pocket, not a penny more, not a penny less, right? So he wanted to like live life to the fullest that way, I guess would be the most, charitable way to put it. That's very different than if you're working for a family where the founder of the family maybe, started the family office 50 years ago, and now you're in the third generation, where you have a mix of second generation and third generation. They've all got different incentives. Some people want to focus on capital preservation, so the money's always there. Others want to grow it. Some want just to like live their life to the fullest. So they want it as soon as possible to go play with it. So those are whole different animals. So when people say family office, like, there are wide ranges and differences between what that actually means, and also wide ranges and differences in what they want to invest in and how sophisticated they are about investing.
And the one that you had worked with, that you had just described there, how did he attain his wealth?
Lucky Sperm Club. His dad made the money. He was born into it. The
I
Lucky
thought you were talking
Sperm
about
Club.
a company. I
No,
thought
no,
you were
no.
talking about it.
Yeah, no, no. His father had created a very large business that was purchased. Now, unfortunately, his father had passed at a young age. And, as much as I'd like to say bad things about him, I will give him one compliment. When he was relatively young and he inherited this money, what was very common among people from his part of the world and, from his upbringing was they would just hand their money over to some outside firm, and that outside firm would go pick a bunch of hedge funds and private equity funds and whatever real estate assets and just invest in them. But he decided at a young age that, like, why am I paying someone else to do this? So he went down, walked up and down Sixth Avenue, met with a bunch of hedge funds, and created his own little fund of funds. Learned the business. If some weren't doing that well, he pulled money out of one, put money into others. He got into private equity very early. He was aggressive early on, and he really did turn a small fortune into a larger fortune. So I'll give him credit for that. He was trying the same strategy in 2008 and 2012, which was a bad time for that strategy. So it caught up with him in some ways, but he really was doing things that were sort of ahead of his time, or above and beyond what his peers were doing when he was younger.
Oh wow! So he had gone and went and basically multiplied the wealth that he inherited from his father.
Yeah, and he was like, if you're in, there's a long period of time which was like boom years for private equity and great returns for hedge funds. And if you're aggressive and you leverage that up and the market's going up, like that goes really, really well. 2008, where everything turns against you, if you're leveraged, like that hurts a lot. So it worked very well for a reasonably long period of time until suddenly and very dramatically it didn't work. That's when I started working for him.
Oh, so that's where he needed an outside, an expert
Well, he
like
had,
you
you
to.
know, we had other people in, but I took over the family office in the beginning of 2009. So the market had already started turning in 2008. So I walked into kind of a platform on fire, a little bit of damage control.
And what were some of your strategies to, like, with your mind that you helped? Okay, this is the situation, we're on fire. How did you now help him? Again, keep multiplying that wealth. Was that also
Yeah.
part of your
So
role?
when I came in, the strategy was fairly clear. Like if he didn't have to sell a position because he was overextended leverage, but if he could find a way not to and avoid doing it, we found a way not to and we avoided it because we had this thesis the market was going to bounce back. And in '09, the market did bounce back pretty well. And all the positions he was able to keep, they grew back to where they needed to be. Like he actually liquidated them all, which some of his creditors wanted him to do. He would have been in a much worse situation than had he did what he did. So a lot of it was like find ways you can keep it, stretch it, just make it through the worst of the crisis. The other thing is we started to acquire companies, private companies, before they went public. There were, even before there was a market for them, which there was for a brief period of time and now not so much. We found ways to get in. So I found Facebook in 2009, and we were able to buy it at, I guess I can say it now, for the equivalent of $1.35 a share, adjusted for splits. So it was a really good buy, paid off like 20 or 30 fold in just a few years. So we started doing a bunch of those. Some paid off, some didn't, but that was a new asset class for him that, if you remember what was going on in '08, that was pretty hot for a period of time.
That was a genius one. And and see, we can just keep talking. So that's we were playing the game, and I just got distracted because I loved just learning from you. The last word I want to use: legacy.
What you want it to be. So, your legacy could be the children that you've raised. It can be a company that you've left behind. It can be an endowment for a charitable organization. It could be your name on a building in a university. Let it be whatever you want it to be. Right? I'm not going to judge you. Right? If you feel like it's important that you have a name on a building and you've made the money, whatever. You gave them the money, good for you. You can have the name on it. It doesn't really do anything for me one way or the other. Like I don't even remember the names of like the buildings that I go into. We're going into the Crown Lecture Hall. I didn't even know it was called that. I just thought it was the main lecture hall. So, it's not for me. Like I focus a little bit more on like making sure the three girls that I'm raising turn out to be everything they can be. That's what's more important for me.
Thank you so much, Andrew. You've really been amazing. I really, really appreciate your energy and your passion into business and helping people and adding value. And yeah, I'm so looking forward to the future. And yeah, thank you just providing value
I
to our
appreciate
audience.
it. Thank you for having me.
No worries. And where can people find you? Anyone who wants to work with you, yeah, let us know.
Yeah, sure. So you have two choices, right? So if you're like, yeah, I really want to learn a little bit more about Andrew, you can go to my website. It's actually down there on the page. Thank you for putting it there. Andrew, B as in boy, Ackerman.com. If you're like, yeah, I've heard enough of this guy, but that book sounds kind of interesting. So you want to go to the Entrepreneur's Odyssey on Amazon. I'm pretty sure none of them have, if there is another book by the same name, they don't have this cool cover. They're certainly not written by me. So you can just go straight to Amazon and buy the book. And hopefully it will save you a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of suffering, and maybe make the difference between the success or failure of your next venture.
There you go. There you have it. Thank you so much, Andrew, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you.
Hey, what's wrong? Bro, I'm stressed out. I'm running my business. I've got to serve my customers, but I need more customers coming in. I can't keep relying on word of mouth. Why don't you just use ETS Rabasha Media? Who? Well, with AI now, what they do is they go in, get your perfect clients, bring them in front of you. So all I got to do is run my business and he brings me opportunities. Think about it. You speak to 3,000 of your ideal customers, convert 1% of that 3,000. That's 30 people. 30 people in a room with you. Can you convert that? Of course I'll close them. I'm good at what I do. I just don't have time to be going and looking for my perfect client. Focus on what you love doing and let them bring you customers. When you win, they win, commission, ching. Sujira Rubasha, huh? Yeah, Sujira Rubasha. Go and Google them, man. Come on, take it to the bank.
If you really enjoyed this video, make sure to click here, and I'm sure you're gonna love that one.